Hello, my name is Daniel Cook, and this is the Phase 3 demo for CS153. Our group is the Four Corners, and our members are Daniel Cook, Gary Wu, Kevin Prada, and Daisy Sanchez. Let's get right into the code. So in order to make our compiler, we first need to run Bison and pass it the .y file. Then we need to run flex and pass it our .lex file. And then finally, we run G++ to make the compiler. So now you see we have my compiler, which is our program, and the mil.run, which is the program that runs mil files. So if we do my compiler and pass it a .text file with our code in it, we're going to do test cases, and we're going to run the array case test. So we do that. It outputs the code here, and it also writes it to an output file. So if we do ls, you see that now we have an output.mil file. And if we look what our test case is, so if we test case and look at the array test case, it's pretty simple. It's a array with 5 elements, and then we set the array to 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25, and then we just output them. So we should expect the output to be 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. So when we run the mil.run and pass it our output.mil, we get 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. Let's do our next case. So we do my compiler, and we're going to pass it test cases and if else test case. We get a new code output here, and let's look at it. So if we do test cases and if else, we wait for it to load. Okay. So num A equals 100, num B equals 50, and C's are going to be our output. So when A is less than B, we're going to output C, or we're going to output A, and otherwise we're going to output B. And so we should expect our output to be 50 because 100 is more than B, which is 50. So when we do mil.run and pass it our output file, we get an output of 50. Let's now run our next one. So my compiler, we're going to pass it a test case, and we're going to pass it our functions test. It's a little bit more code, but let's look what it does. So we're going to look at test cases. Oh, that's the wrong one. That one. Okay. So basically, we have a function called add, which takes in num1 and num2, and it adds those two and outputs it, or returns it. We have a mult, which takes in one value and multiplies it by 2, and that returns the value. So basically, 5 plus 10, and we're going to pass those values and return it into D. And so we should get an output of 15, and then we're going to multiply D, which is 15, and then we should get an output of 30. So if we run our mil.run and we pass it the new output, we get 10 or 15, and we get 30. Do we have any more we need to check? Let's see. My compiler, test case. Oh, our while loop. Okay. So we're going to pass it our while loop test. It's pretty simple, but the Fibonacci and like the bubble sort kind of go over the same stuff. That's why a lot of our tests are pretty simple. So let's vim test case while loop. It's basically going to output the values from 1 to 10 because it adds the value and then it outputs. It's basically our for loop. So we should expect to see 1 through 10 output. So if we've done the run.mil file, or mil.run file, and then we pass it our output file, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so now let's do some error cases. So we're going to do my compiler, we're going to do error cases, and we're going to do error case 1. Now we get some errors, and it doesn't output the actual code here, and it also doesn't copy the code. So we're going to still have the old output file if we ran it. So let's see what the errors are. So error test 1. We get an error on line 6 for val1 already exists, and then an error on line 8 for val1 already exists. So we see val1 is declared on line 3, and then on line 6 it tries to declare it again, and then on line 8 it tries to declare it again but also tries to initialize it, and either way it gets the error. So now let's pass it my compiler, errors, and error case 2. Now we get variable val1 is not initialized and val1 is not initialized on 2 different lines. So if we look at error cases, error test 2. On line 8 we have output val1, and then on line 9 well, anyway, so on line 8 we get val1 is not declared. It's one line off, but you can see val1 still hasn't been declared. It's been declared, it hasn't been initialized, and that's what our error is. It hasn't been initialized. So if we move on, my compiler, error cases, and error 3. We get the error on line 24 that our function divide is not defined. And if we look at that, this is actually the same code for our functions test. The only difference is now we try to output a divide, but since divide isn't actually made, we get an error on line 24 because function is not defined. Finally, let's look at my compiler and our final error case. So we get a couple of errors here. So let's see what we got. So we have on line 5 that value 4 isn't initialized, which is true. But we also have on line 5 that value 4 isn't declared, which is also true. And then if we look on line 5, val 3 also isn't defined. So we catch all those errors, but it is initialized because it's been initialized by val 4. And then if we look on line 6, val 3 still isn't declared, but it would be initialized. And that's all of our error cases. So now, if we run our 2 main codes we're supposed to run. So we get test cases, and we're going to first do the Fibonacci test. Makes not actually very much lines of code. So when we run this, run.mil or mil.run, and we take it, pass it at output, we get 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34. We only have it output the first 10 because there's infinite Fibonacci numbers, and yeah, I don't really want to know what happens when you do that. So if we look at our Fibonacci code, test case, and the Fibonacci code, this is pretty simple Fibonacci. It's a while loop and just adds, and it outputs the first 2 to begin with. And finally, let's look at our bubble sort. So if we do /my compiler and we do the test case and the bubble sort, we get actually a decent amount of code here. So how our bubble sorter works is, first we initialize it an array with some numbers. It's going to be 1, 5, 4, 3, 2. And so after the bubble sort, it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? All this is just the code in our language, and first it outputs it, as what the array is to start, and then it outputs it at the end. So if we run the mil.run and pass it the output, we get 134 or 15432, and then this is the output after 1 2 3 4 5. And that's pretty much all I have to show. Is there anything else I was supposed to go over? Test cases, errors, execute. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for your time.